We'll now be taking a look at kingship and law in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. And as we do so, I'd like you to consider how much the environment, the climate, the geography, frequently the things that human beings can't change, affect societal order. Societal order we can think of as the law, but even when there aren't formal laws in place, it's about the relationship between the ruler and the ruled, as well as the relationship between the ruled in terms of each other. So over the course, also consider carefully how and why societies and their leaders might understand order differently. Think also about what kinds of sources, myths, law codes, buildings, religious beliefs, might shed light on how and why they understand order and how and why they might enforce it as they did. So the civilizations that arise in Egypt arise there shortly after Sumer, or one of those Mesopotamian civilizations. And there was likely some contact between them, but Egypt develops essentially as a distinct civilization of its own. But in both cases, the value of land and resources has already begun to increase. And as it does, societal order changes as that value of the land and other resources does increase. So we have to consider, where is the civilization located? Are there a lot of people passing through that might pose a threat? Or are they somewhat left alone given geography and other characteristics? Might kingship mean something different if the river that sustains you can also seem to attack you without notice? And might kingship mean something different if few bother to venture in your direction or seize your resources? So, in Mesopotamia, a long geographical history of very volatile rivers, weather, and people that move across this landscape. So, for their religion and leadership and their ideals of kingship, there's going to be a theme of rivalry. Who's going to contend and how might one win? This is the land of warring sky gods, as they might be seen. Gods that can rival the king. They might be represented in things like thunder and lightning, dust storms, things that seem to threaten people, but also potentially threaten a king. At the same time, a king is supposed to lead. So if there's regular warfare in an area, those skills, the warfaring skills, are going to become increasingly important, and that's certainly the case in Mesopotamia. The Mesopotamians begin to build cities with walls, which is always a sign that there seems to be some threat afoot. There's a growing population in these cities, but that also means there are increased problems, as well as that inconsistent environment. So, in Mesopotamia, the god king, as he was understood, must be a warrior and dominate. But people also are understood to have recourse. Now, they don't have a vote back in this time, but they can ask the gods for help. So there's also the idea built into kingship that the king is not supposed to take advantage of his status or the societal order, and the relationship between king and gods will not be kept. We see this, for example, in the long-time epic of Gilgamesh, that the king is not supposed to abuse power and what happens and what the gods do when he does. Now, in Egypt, there's also a relationship between religion and leadership, but there's a greater theme of balance. And again, we might consider the geography. This was known as the land of divine harmony. The goddess Mat was supposedly in charge of balancing the conflicting cosmic forces. And the pharaoh, the king, and at times the queen, we might say, were responsible for this. But Egypt is different than Mesopotamia. There's a more or less consistent environment with regular flooding of the Nile, consistent agricultural production, as well as herding and other processes that produce food and otherwise. They also had many fewer invaders given their geography. They have a desert, a sea around them, and fewer people were going to be wandering through or potentially have access to their resources. There, the god king is truth, law, and justice. And if the pharaoh doesn't keep this balance, this divine harmony, then potentially the people, the area, Egypt is subject to problems. So what might those be? Well, is there a possibility that the Nile might become irregular? Might an invasion occur? Might production and strength decrease if the pharaoh isn't leading appropriately. So overall, there are differences between these two. There's different geography, different threats, different understandings, therefore, of order. Unlike Hammurabi and other Mesopotamian civilizations or law codes, there isn't a law code found in Egypt, although a well-ordered society is absolutely the priority. There's also a theme of balance in Egypt, sort of versus the presumed conflict and required dominance seen in Mesopotamia. Similarities, there is a god-king, and there's also, therefore, an implied recourse that the people should have to their gods if the king doesn't act correctly. Land, in both cases, is at the core of resources, though not only so. And geography, climate, and other environmental components influence the understanding of the world, the gods, and what a good leader should be.